that there were 7 lamps blazing in front of the main throne, lamps which he then details are the 7 spirits of God. Amongst all of this is a lion, an ox, an eagle, and a creature that has a face like a man, all of which were covered with eyes and were equipped with a set of 6 wings. It's here where John sees a glimpse of the figure in the main throne, his right hand to be more precise, and sees that a scroll has been produced with writing on both sides, which was sealed with 7 seals. John tells us that the angel declares in 5:2 who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll, but that no one in heaven could open the scroll or even look inside of it. Saddened by this, John tells us that he wept, but that he then sees a lamb standing in the center of the throne. The lamb has 7 horns and 7 eyes, which we are told are the 7 spirits of God that were sent out into all of earth. The lamb appears to take the scroll from the right hand of the man in the throne, and when it had taken it, John tells us that the 4 creatures and the 24 elders all fell before the lamb, and that the lamb was worshipped for having been worthy to receive the scroll. But where do the 4 horsemen fit into all of this, I hear you ask? Well, the lamb proceeds to open the 7 seals, and John watches on as each seal is broken. In 6:2 he tells us, "I watched as the lamb opened the first seal of the 7 seals. I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out as a conqueror, bent on conquest." In 6:3 he tells us, when the lamb opened the 2nd seal, another horse came out, a fiery red one. Its rider was given power to take peace from the earth and to make people kill each other. To him was given a large sword. In 6:5 through 6, John tells us, when the lamb opened the 3rd seal, I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures, saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine. When the lamb opens the 4th seal, John tells us that, I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. It is these 4 riders who would become known as the 4 horsemen, and going by their biblical descriptions, you can see why they may have become so terrible to comprehend. For the most part, a common interpretation of these horsemen are that they represent a period of time where humans will be killed by a combination of wars, disease, famine, and things of the like. Going by what the Bible says, this seems to be pretty sound, what with the 1st horseman described as being bent on conquest, the 2nd being described as taking peace from the earth and making men slay each other, the 3rd representing high food prices, with the creature voicing a poor bartering deal, and the 4th outrightly being called Death. All 4 of these horsemen are summed up in the final line of 6:8. They were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine and plague, and by wild beasts of the earth. It becomes pretty obvious by this that the intentions of the horsemen are to wreak havoc and destruction upon the earth, but that each of them will go about it in a different way, targeting humanity in the ways it will affect them most.
All your money went towards your bills, but you need a little gas to get you through till next payday. That's where Chime comes in. They have this new feature called Spot Me. It lets you cover up to $100 until you get paid next with no fees. What are you waiting for? Join Chime.
They put me in the dead pile. I've been shot 6 times with a bullet in my skull.
The very first horseman, sometimes referred to as the White Rider or simply Pestilence, is described as carrying a bow and wearing a victor's crown. A common interpretation of the White Rider is that he is associated with the plague or infectious disease, but the Bible does not seem to indicate this in the passage. How the first horseman came to represent pestilence isn't exactly known, though some will agree that the reference of plague in 6:8 likely corresponds to the first horseman, given that the other references, sword, famine and wild beasts, may be easily attributed to the other 3 horsemen. But this is still largely up for debate. In a 1916 novel titled The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, the White Rider is described as bending his bow to spread pestilence, and that his arrows were infused with bacteria. Others see this White Rider as Jesus Christ, and that he is a representation of the spreading of his word, and not of disease. In fact, it's understood that there was a time where many saw this first White Rider as a benign figure, one who was Christ, or at least one who represented God, similarly to an angel. Christ does later appear on a white horse in Revelation 19, which may support the idea of this being Christ, particularly when you consider the colour white being a symbol of purity and righteousness. The line that refers to the White Rider wearing a crown can also be linked to Christ, suggesting that Christ is the King of all men, as well as the line that describes the White Rider as being a conqueror, in that Christ may be seen as the conqueror of evil.